Welcome to June. Again. I'm feeling like there's an echo going on in the internets, right? Do you remember last year we spent all of June thinking about pride and pride and pride, and we went down. It's like, and it feels like here we are again in Riot month. What is happening to our storyline, right? Why is it that there is nothing about reruns on social media? We had riots in 2020, we have riots in 2025. Oh yes, and we had planned the topic for tonight yesterday, and oh, there's another thing that everybody's thinking about right now, which is also a rerun. We need to figure out why this is happening. We're going to do a little dive into the archives tonight. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Yeah,
Thank
really?
you.
Are we in the middle of a story right now?
Sorry.
How? No, I'm like, I feel like we're caught in perpetual reruns. Never mind Groundhog Day. This has got, Friday the 13th. Yet again, here we are in people out in the streets. I guess it's just summer. Is that what happens?
What, riot season?
Yeah, I guess so. Because
Right.
we were gonna do riot season, you guys, and Casey's done a whole big deep dive, and she's gonna tell us some stories tonight, and I'm gonna sit back and not talk to you about what I'm writing about for this talk that I'm giving in a few weeks. Um, and then last night happened. So prayers for everyone who's affected by the rockets in the Middle East. Again,
Yeah.
I
Again,
how are we in this story over and over and over again? I feel like we're trapped in a horrible hamster loop.
because it works.
For whom? That's the
Give them the old
thing.
razzle dazzle, razzle dazzle.
What do you mean by that? Do you have a theory? Are you
I have
are
my
y- is
theory.
this it does it, I mean, is it what kind of theory is it? This is a conspiracy theory about what's going on?
It's a sleight of hand.
Mm.
It's and that was done. That was talked about a lot today about what Trump when Israel were doing, the Trump administration,
Oh my gosh.
um, saying, "Oh yeah, no, 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 we want talks, we want talks," and they're claiming it was a distraction, but I don't know what to believe because that itself could be a distraction.
I indeed. I mean, I'd like talk about, the more we do the deep dive into the internets, the more you find out uh, 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 I mean, not even sides, right? It's like it's
Yeah.
interesting how the razzle dazzle is meaning to make us take sides, and
Yes.
but I have been interested in the sort of massive declarations of tribal loyalties have not really been happening in what I've seen.
No, it's not working. It's not
Mm.
working because they've played that hand too often.
Who's the
Um,
they?
who's the they?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just discussing this right off screen. I said I can understand why conspiracy theorists, and I got to put that in quotes because we don't really know what's real and what isn't.
Mm.
But one of the more popular conspiracy theories, Mike Myers joked about this ages ago in a hilarious movie called "So I Married an Axe Murderer." But that the world was being run by a handful of families,
Mm.
and they're very wealthy, very old families, and they're controlling everything, and they're starting all the wars, and they're taking both sides in all the wars, and they're profiting off all the wars. And I can see why people came up with this theory, because they keep doing the same things over and over again to distract us. And one of the biggest things is riots.
How interesting. You found some evidence for this, didn't you? Shall,
I
shall,
did.
shall we go into it? Shall we go into the archive? I've got some images here. Let's go into the
Sure.
archive. All right. Take it away. They're in the order that you gave them to me, so just tell me when to advance.
Okay, because I can't see them.
Well, you
So
get
give me a
pull
brief.
get your picture, get your list in somewhere else. The
Okay,
behind the
okay,
scenes tech practice that we ladies do is
okay. So
intense and noteworthy.
the first, okay, so the first slide, I believe, is a picture of what's called the Whiskey Rebellion, right?
The Whiskey Rebellion. Okay, I'm
Right.
I'm
So
I'm
you
I'm
were probably
soaking it up. I'm soaking it up here,
okay.
guys. I get to be
You
the
probably
I know I get to be the student tonight. This is great. I love class.
you were probably all taught, at least in grade school, about the Whiskey Rebellion, right? The
I
Whiskey Rebellion.
I think
No,
we probably should have. If it's there, it's a line in the textbook, right? Rather than
it's a line in the textbook, right? But
yeah,
there were entire books written about this in the early part of the 19th century, in the later
oh,
18th century, right after we became a country.
huh. Okay, so give us a date here. I'm lost. I'm lost. I'm
Okay,
lost.
17. Okay, I'll do a brief reading. 1794, because the illustration and information are from a 1794 book called Devon's Our First Century. It's on page 161. So the subtitle of that page is Great and Memorable Events. The Whiskey Rebellion took place in Western Pennsylvania from 1791 to 1794.
3 years. Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I like that
Uh,
this is the book. Say what the book is again.
okay.
Devon's.
So look, it's an old one. It's called, and you can probably find it on Internet Archive, because I think I had a copy of it there.
Yeah.
I actually found it by tracing an illustration I found of it, because I remembered reading about the Whiskey Rebellion. Um, it's called Devon's Our First Century, right? But there are many books,
So the
and
American
first,
first century.
right, the American First
Okay.
Century is what they meant. Yeah. And essentially, there was a big debt after the Revolutionary War ended and victory was declared, before we elected our first president, and before the first Constitutional Convention was convened. They needed to raise money, so they decided to levy a tax on
So we've been doing
on
this even
whiskey.
before we had a proper president. This
Yes,
is
I
so.
think
So
so.
if we're
Yeah.
blaming the president, it's wait a
So
minute.
General Washington came out of retirement to address this, but and I don't know all the details, because I read about this very quickly today, but I did
You've
copy
got the
something else
book
I wanted.
now, so you're reading it
Yeah,
for all of. We're all here.
right.
We're all here
I
to
will read a
learn.
page of it.
We're all here to
Okay, so I
learn.
just wanted to give you a brief history. So all these probably mostly Irish, i.e. Ulster Scots, Western
Yes.
Pennsylvania, said,
Could
we're
have
not
been
paying taxes on
Fulton's.
our whiskey. Yeah, we are not paying taxes on our whiskey, right? And liberty and no, their motto was liberty and no excise, right?
Mm.
And so they
So
decided,
liberty just originally means let us drink our beer. Let us drink our whiskey.
leave us alone, right?
No,
It's
but I
like,
mean,
it's
it's interesting.
yeah.
So that it's liberty. It's this. I mean, this is the setup for the revolution itself, right? They were going to throw all the tea in the harbor because we don't want to pay that tariff, right? That
Well, that was a small part of it, but yeah,
that
the tariffs, yeah,
the the empire wants to put on its
right.
shipments through
There,
us, through our
yeah, there was a
colonies.
lot of other things going on. That was just more of like a spectacular stunt they could pull to draw attention to it. But
But that one didn't
so
count as one of your riots. You started with 1791
right.
instead of Tea Party.
No, so this whole thing, right? 1791. This is post revolution, not pre. So 1791 to 1794, all these farmers who were making extra money distilling whiskey from the grain that they grew
Got it.
didn't want to pay the taxes on it, and they decided they're going to declare independence, right?
It's a
And
fine tradition.
right now we learned this as the Whiskey Rebellion, but this book called it the Whiskey Insurrection. Sound familiar?
Oh, so we're also doing a vocabulary hunt tonight. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we know where the words that so who called it an insurrection?
So in this book, it was called an insurrection.
And
So
you when is the book published that you're looking at?
this book was published in 1794, I think. Yeah.
Oh, so
So
right
very
after.
early,
So
right after. There
our
were so
first
many
century
people that, yeah,
means the 18th
yeah,
century. Okay.
yes,
And
yes,
from the beginning, even before we had a president, we got
yes,
people labeling protests against taxes insurrection.
yes. They were labeling it an insurrection, and they weren't wrong. They wanted to reject the new government, right? Because the new
Which
government was taxing them. And this wasn't the first one. There was actually one in Western Massachusetts called Shays Rebellion, but I
Mhm.
wanted to focus on this one because I thought most Americans watching this would have learned it at least in grade school if they're taking American history,
Okay.
um, about the Whiskey Rebellion, and how George Washington was very instrumental in putting it down, and how that's always been used, as kind of a proof that no, the states didn't have the right to secede. This was not a state seceding, it was like a part of a state. They were trying to secede,
Just a
right?
subgroup.
Yeah. But it was quite serious because they actually organized into a militia. They attacked the representatives of the federal government that came to collect the taxes. And I'll read a short excerpt that came along with this picture. Okay. It was at this stage in the progress of affairs, and only one day preceding the assembling of an important meeting of malcontents of Pittsburgh, that the tax collector for the counties of Allegheny and Washington made his appearance. Aware of his business, a party of men, armed and disguised, waylaid him at a place on Pigeon Creek in Washington County, seized, tarred and feathered him, cut off his hair, and deprived him of his horse, obliging him to decamp on foot in that ludicrous and painful condition. Tarring and feathering is very painful. If they
Yes.
dipped him in the tar, it could actually cripple you.
Yeah.
In attempting to serve legal process upon the perpetrators of this outrage, the marshal's deputy was also seized, whipped, tarred and feathered, and having his money and horse taken from him, the ruffians blindfolded and led him into the depths of the forest, where he was tied and left to his fate. He was fortunately discovered in season and rescued by some friends. So that's what goes along with this picture. It was pretty ugly. It was pretty ugly really, really soon, and they did take it very seriously, and they did put it down. But it was over taxes. But they did call it an insurrection, and I
I'm
thought
gonna
that
I'm
was,
gonna embiggen it so you can see this guy being
yeah,
carried on
ridden
a
out on the
rail.
rail.
Yeah,
Hmm.
he's being carried. He looks like Sasquatch because he's all
Yes,
he's been tarred.
I am going to attempt to look at my Dropbox here because I don't want to try to guess at what I'm seeing here. So just one second.
So this one, I mean, this one's complicated. For one, it you say the rebellion happens over several years, and
Yes,
they have to send in. How do they eventually? How does the United States government, very new, it's the first one of the first things he has to cope
yes,
with, deal with it?
by raising or just recalling back up the soldiers and going and taking control back over these counties that were doing this. That's how they did it.
So taking
Yeah,
sides on this is a sort of tricky proposition, right? Because are you on the side of the whiskey
right, right,
rebelliers, the whiskey
and
rebels, or are you on
right.
the side of the government coming in and So in fact, what we are saying is the United States government basically from its inception was sending in troops to quell riots.
Yes, yes, and this was a riot, and they called it an insurrection
And
because
yes,
that's a
in their
better
minds it
punch,
was a
right?
riot. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But yeah, it's depicted here, obviously after the fact, and drawn in what was probably a periodical of the time of a riot. It's a riot. Yeah, they
Well,
attacked the government, and then it's same as what's going on in LA right now. The people came to do their lawful duty and were attacked.
the
Right.
guy that's been tarred and feathered. Right, he's a
Yes.
tax
Right.
collector. So Rogue Wave is saying, yeah, I've been feeling like everything pertaining to secular politics is kayfabe to the max. Well, we're on a quest tonight to figure out how we can tell. As and I'm trying to keep my mouth close to my. I've been watching all the guys who do proper, like, get have bigger audiences than we do, and they seem to keep their mouths close to the mic. As a
Okay.
Scots, don't know, maybe that'll help. As a Scots Irish descendant living in Western Pennsylvania, so we've got a local, someone who can attest to this. I
Oh,
sympathize with the idea of rebellion for overtaxation on alcohol. Here in PA, you can only buy hard alcohol from state-run stores.
uh,
So they won. That's the state won in this particular exercise.
Washington State used to be the same way. They stopped that about 10 years ago, I think 10 or 15 years ago.
That you
But
could,
that's not uncommon. Yeah, you had to buy it from the state store.
huh? So
Yeah.
if I'm drinking it, I'm mainly in Texas, and that one we still have like dry counties
Mm,
where you can't buy anything. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know if we have the blue laws anymore, but okay. Well, that's so. What we're saying is this is a complicated story from the get go. So
Hmm.
it just any questions, guys? This is we're going to try to. I've also learned that it does actually help to take feedback from the chat. I am told, chat, that the timing on things is presumably getting quicker in UATV. That there's more like there's less lag in the chat. Maybe some of you guys, if you're subscribers, can hop over to that chat and see if it works. Um, okay, so that 1791 first riot, and
Right.
and the guy gets tarred and feathered. All right,
Yes. Yes.
number two. Okay, this
Okay.
this looks like a government building and people in the street rioting. Oh, right. Okay, that's kind of our theme tonight.
Oh yeah. This is crazy. Now I love American history. I did not know about this. This is
Oh,
crazy. This is called
okay.
the Astor Opera House riots of 1849.
Oh, we've
And
leapt ahead. Okay.
yeah, we have leapt ahead a bit. So the riots I chose to focus on when I'm collecting these today, they aren't. Some of them are major ones. Some of them are minor ones. They all look the same, and a lot of them use shockingly similar tactics. Remember that what I just said.
Similar tactics on
Yeah.
both sides, you mean? Both the government side and the rioters side?
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
And that'll come in handy at the end of this little chat. Okay, so the Astor Place riot occurred on May 10th, 1849, at what is now the demolished Astor Opera House in Manhattan. Its ostensible genesis was the dispute between Edwin Forrest, one of the best known American actors of that time, and William Charles Macready, a similarly notable English actor, which largely revolved around which of them was better than the other at acting the major roles of Shakespeare.
Ah, this is a good. They had a riot over this.
They had a riot.
This is how we know that worrying about Shakespeare is what, pro or anti civilization.
So it was very pro civilization. So when I was reading about this, I learned, I cannot verify this, but that Shakespeare was so popular in the 19th century that people would entertain themselves by memorizing it, even like working class people.
Hmm.
So the Astor Opera House was built by very wealthy people in New York, and it was placed on the border with a very poor working neighborhood, probably mostly Irish, the Bowery, and this was their attempt to class up the joint, right? They're going to build an opera house. Now it couldn't sustain in a full season of opera, so they started having different shows and things like that there, including Shakespeare,
Hmm.
right? And they would invite this Macready in because he was a very famous actor, and Forrest was the first American actor who had gained international prominence because he had also performed in England. This quickly turned into a kind of a class warfare type rivalry between the two men. Who was better, the English or the American. This is
Hmm.
still for the memory of the American Revolution is still very fresh, and
Well,
I
and,
think
and
that
and the War of 1812 too, probably.
in the War of 1812,
Like the
right, which was
British,
a
the
continuation.
Brit, the British, just can't seem to keep their opinions to themselves.
Or their hands to themselves, right? They were trying to grab land, and what makes it extra interesting is so Forrest was married to an English woman, and he started divorce proceedings, claiming she cheated on him, right? The judge found that she did not, granted the divorce on her favorable terms to her, right? This was probably I'm guessing it was an American judge. I don't know, but anyway, that just made the kind of the rivalry worse. They would show up at each other's shows and boo and hiss,
Oh
and
my
it got
gosh.
so bad at one point that that the Forest supporters showed up at McCready's performance and threw a dead sheep on stage. It was just awful. But they turned
Why a
it.
dead sheep?
Why a dead sheep? I don't know.
Just
I
they
wonder what
did.
play it was.
Uh,
I don't know.
Well, so I mean, this is hilarious because we have the sort of the cultural problem we have now is this imagination that Shakespeare is all elevating and everything.
Right, and it wasn't. It was always up until recently. It was always the theater for the common man,
Mm.
right? And that's what it turned into, this rivalry of what's better, American or English. This
Huh.
this is English cultural imperialism, if you will, right?
Right.
Why it got to the level that it did, I don't know. I do know that the people who were supporting, from what I've read, the people who were supporting the American were using the poor classes. They were kind of like stoking anger and resentment, and they were all Irish against this English guy. So I think he might have been doing it just for Forrest and his supporters might have been doing it for spite,
Well,
or
you
to
said
promote
it's
the Astor Opera,
1849.
right? To support the Astor Opera House. I'm not sure.
But the English have been starving the Irish at this point.
They have, so it didn't take much
Like
to set them off, I'm
1847,
sure.
1848. That's the Great
Yes,
Famine. So
right.
there's little love lost between the
No,
Irish and
right.
the
But they were,
English.
right. But they were being used. They were stoking the fans of English hatred here, and
Ah.
it was something they could agree upon. The English and the natives that had already been there, which were all English and Dutch, they could agree on this, right? They could agree on this. We don't want the English here, and it just escalated and escalated and escalated until it finally resulted in a riot. Um, and it actually reminds me of rivalries between sporting teams,
Mm-hmm.
between cities sometimes. It doesn't get this bad all the time, and people make jokes about, oh, I guess they're going to riot in Philadelphia because the Eagles won, right? Well, there was a time where you couldn't go to say New York and wear a Boston Red Sox hat. And when I say a time, I'm talking 20, 25 years ago, right? The rivalries were bad, and it was starting street fights, and they just said, you get your hat off. This whole thing about men taking their hat off indoors, it started the same way, because you were picking a fight if you came in with your armor on, right? You had to take it off.
Right.
So it's very similar, and this kind of reminds me of that, but it just escalated out of control, surrounded around the Astor Opera House. I want to read a little bit about let's see, a little bit more, I should say. So this, let's see. I'm leaving a lot of detail out here, but it happened over a period of months, and then it just kind of escalated until May 10th. An actual riot occurred, but they had advertised for the riot. Show your support. Show up on this day.
They planned
Sound
for it.
familiar? They planned it. Yes, there were
Wow.
bills made up and flyers put out. Okay,
But
between
the
22
purpose of
and
a riot to say we're gonna confront them?
they didn't say we're going to riot. They
Right.
said we're going to show our support,
Ah,
right?
okay.
But everybody, wink, wink. Everybody knew what that meant.
Well,
Okay,
because
between
in
20.
1848 they'd had in Europe all the barricades, right? So the sort of the concept of a street riot is well established by
Yes,
1849.
yeah. Throughout human history, that's been a thing. I think they even had riots in Rome, ancient Rome.
Well,
They certainly had
they're
rebellions.
very civilized because you realize they happen in cities.
Yes.
You don't have riots out in the countryside. I mean, you maybe have
No,
battles in the countryside, but
no, you don't.
but
Yeah.
the mob, so called in ancient Rome, is the mobile, right?
Yes.
They're the moving. It's the moving through the city, and so
Yeah.
that this is. Yeah, so there's a meta level of wondering the psychology of. I mean, we're worrying at the beginning about like the degree to which all of this rioting is politically orchestrated.
Yes. And I'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll just read this one little two paragraphs here. Okay, so between 22 and 31 rioters were killed, 48 were wounded, 50 to 70 policemen were injured. Of the militia, 141 were injured by the various missiles.
They're
Three
throwing
judges
rocks and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
bottles, probably Molotov cocktails, who knows. 3 judges presided over a related trial, including Charles Patrick Daly, a judge on the New York Court of Common Pleas, who pressed for convictions. The city's elite were unanimous in their praise of the authorities for taking a hard line against the rioters. Publisher James Watson Webb wrote this: "The promptness of the authorities in calling out the armed forces and the unwavering steadiness with which the citizens obeyed the order to fire on the assembled mob was an excellent advertisement to the capitalists of the old world, that they might send their property to New York and rely upon the certainty that it would be safe from the clutches of red republicanism or Chartists or communionists of any description."
Oh my gosh. I
Yes.
see why you were. So this is okay. One, the Communist Manifesto was published in February 1848. So
Yeah.
and so there and the 1848 riots happened everywhere in Europe pretty much except England, which
Uh-huh.
I now find I used to find like heartening because like Parliament's doing its reform and now I just find suspicious.
Yeah, they were pushing it up onto New York, I guess.
Well, and the Chartists, so Ingalls writes about the Chartists in his the condition of the working class in England. And I mean they had actually done a big petition and taken it to Parliament to try to call for various reforms. There was all sorts of potential almost riots in England in this period, but
Right.
it was only but England did not have, oh, guess what, a change of government in 1848 where pretty much everywhere else did.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So they
Yeah,
yes,
I
they
would be suspicious too. How did you manage
now,
not to
oh,
do
I
that,
didn't
Ava?
used to be suspicious. I used to be, oh, it's all good that they're making all these reforms. I every single time I teach Ingalls, right? Every other year I teach Eurociv, and I have to change my reading from time to time. It's like stick with the primary sources because your sense of what the story is will keep changing, and it's gone another flip on me of late. However, I mean, I don't. The thing is, finding out who are the good guys in any of these stories is a little bit of a lost hope, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But this was a riot over Shakespeare,
Started over
allegedly.
Shakespeare, but I think what was happening was people were just using a cultural moment. They were using it, and you'll see that again in the slides coming up. Using a cultural moment to press for riots.
Shall we move on? What's next? Okay, we've got
Sure.
um. All right, uh, uh, drawing Jefferson Street.
Yep. This
Okay.
is the Chicago Haymarket Riot of 1886.
Oh well, a bunch of. So I'm sure you're going to tell us this, but the people that practiced this came over from Europe.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was the labor movement. This was a labor demonstration, and it was starting to get rowdy, and the police showed up to break it up. And one of the protesters or somebody mingling amongst them, threw a bomb at the police and killed 7 policemen.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us this one in more detail. That I do know. What was I reading? That I know this. Oh, David Blackburn's book on Germany and the world. This is if you want the full backstory. But there were Germans in this Haymarket riot, and they were people that had come over, having had
uh,
experience in the 1848.
yeah. So you know more about it than I do. I didn't actually copy the
No, that's
information off
as
of
much
that.
as I know. Right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just
But it
I
was
just know these. You know the details of these particular events, and I'm like, oh right, that connects to this other thing that I've heard about.
right. So that was a labor riot that was happening, or demonstration they called it. And in 1886, there were others too.
Mm.
So that was just one of the slides of 1886. If you go to the next one,
What did you have more detail in the Haymarket one?
I don't have any more detail on the Haymarket one. It was a labor movement. It was a labor for labor reforms.
Well, so this
Um,
is important because, of course, the people who are rioting now have all of this in their backstory, and
yep.
to a certain extent, they're conscious of it. These are their heroic events, right?
Well, yeah,
The Haymarket riot is often used as one of their
Yeah, they kept doing
touchstones.
it. They kept doing it into the 20th century. Even the small town I used to live in, Everett, Washington, had the Everett Massacre, right? And
Right.
it's called the Everett Massacre because that's the newspapers took sides, right? It was either,
Very much so. Yeah.
yeah. So if you liked what these people were doing, they those poor souls were massacred. Yeah, when in fact, the international workers of the world, uh, they recruited 300 young men to go take ferries up to Everett and convince the owners of the mills up there to do what they want. And of course, the meaning there is that they were just going to burn the place down and beat them up until they got what they wanted. And they caught wind of it, deputized half the men in the city, and a battle ensued, and some of the city sheriffs were killed, and 7 of the rioters were killed. But depending upon who reported on it, it was a massacre. So this was called the Haymarket Riot, right? So, and probably because they killed so many policemen, and it was, I don't want to say unprovoked. Well, you can't provoke a bomb. That's just go way overboard, right? But now who would have said it, right? So if you're with the
Right.
international workers of the world, you could say, well, that's convenient. Now everybody hates us, and everybody did. Everybody did hate them after that.
Well,
It took them a while to recover.
yeah, this is where I mean, so again, you get I inflict upon you these texts that I've basically memorized because I teach them so regularly, but they're helpful, right? The Ingalls work, condition of the working class in England. He writes it after being in Manchester for a few years, right? When I tell it, I think this still holds, right? He's basically like a graduate student in
Mm,
age. When he's sent to Manchester by his father to work in their textile mills, and he ends up collecting all this data that, I mean, it's hilarious because he's writing the book saying nobody's ever written about this, and it's like, how do you have all these sources? um,
no,
so he's collected up all these parliamentary reports that they've been doing about the conditions of the industrial production, right? And in
mhm,
Manchester, there's definite, like slums, and there's real problems that
mhm,
Ingalls is reporting on. But one of the big ones is, guess what? Immigration,
right,
because the Irish are coming over to Manchester and working in the mills, and they will come, and of course, as immigrants will, live in conditions that the local workers consider subhuman, right?
yeah,
And when Ingalls writes the conditions of the working class, he's not yet on the side of the Irish. I think he has an Irish maid who he impregnates and then abandons. So Ingalls is not a good
what a
guy.
shock,
They're none of them.
yeah,
Nobody ends up as good guys in this. But at that point he's describing the Irish as basically filthy and animal like, and they'll live in these horrible conditions and stuff. And of course they've come over from Ireland because I don't think the English have
yeah,
started starving them at that point, but they they don't have great conditions in Ireland, and at least in Manchester they can work in the factories. But he's going through all of these reports, which means people were collecting information on how bad things were, and he
mhm,
just reports it back at the bourgeoisie, basically. But he claims to be writing for the Germans and saying, things have progressed further in England, and we'll get there soon, so you need to study this. It's like he publishes it more as a caution. He publishes it originally in German, more as a cautionary tale for the Germans, and
hmm,
it's not translated into English until the late 19th century, and it's then that you get the actual term industrial revolution. He coins it, but it doesn't come into
ah,
English until, in fact, after this Haymarket riot. So
mhm,
the 19th century, and it's like so much happens in the 19th century. One, that the
yes,
massive industrialization, the massive urbanization, particularly in England. And so it is actually curious that England manages not to have its government overthrown by riots in 1848, because pretty much everywhere else does.
I'm sorry, I laugh because it's like,
I wonder
are they
why.
causing
Who's
are they
starting them?
causing the riots elsewhere, right? I
Maybe
mean,
right now.
yeah,
No, I mean we saw that thing that Richard Price, is it Richard Price, published about what happened in World War I, and he has some. I think there are agents out there. The communist the communist revolutions all spark up so rapidly in one year, in a month or two, right?
Yeah.
riot season, they had an organization to set these things up in pamphlets.
Yeah. Yeah. They've been working on this for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, causing strong emotional reactions by, extracting strong emotional reactions from the public by causing disasters and riots and cities to burn down and people to be killed in the street. That's just something that keeps working. So they keep doing it over and over again. The people that take advantage of things like a labor movement,
Right.
as you pointed out, which was needed because working conditions were terrible. They were terrible for one of the figures. One of the articles I read today said that they were trying to help start a 10-hour workday for children. No
Yes.
more than 10
No more
hours.
than 10. Right.
You know, yeah.
Well, and the thing
And
is,
this is progress.
the Parliament does manage to pass a number of laws over the course of the 19th century, include, child labor and
Hmm.
working hours and things like that. So, you can tell it as a story as the Parliament is good guys.
Well, you can, but and then you see another, from it looks like it's around from 1900, memorial to the success that this whatever group it was had in helping women only have to work like the same thing, a 10-hour day.
Right. Yeah.
And the memorial is the woman's got a baby in her hand. She's going, thank you so much. I only have to work 10 hours before I go home and work all night long with this baby.
Right.
So there's the origins of the two income family right there.
Oh,
And
and this is, yeah. So Mel is saying, so what you're saying is that these No Kings protests are the British. Well, maybe. I
maybe
don't know where Casey's going with this. No, the
I am
problem
going somewhere.
the problem with the gender inversion stuff is already noted by Ingalls. He has a whole very poignant chapter on the women are hired into the factories and the men don't get this. There's a problem with the men being kicked out of jobs and not being hired. It was already there in 1844.
Wow.
Yeah,
And is it because they paid the women less?
so what's interesting is like for textile mills, that's actually the women's work in the first place. It's like they've
Oh,
stolen their piecework. It's like the
yeah.
AI version of things now, right? It's like these women
Hmm.
had done the textile work at home. But then the factories get set up and so the women all go work there. And then the men can't get jobs and the women end up supporting them and the men feel emasculated and humiliated and spend all their time at
Yeah.
home drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, this is the meta level of things is this is a massive effect of industrialization and urbanization. And then, but which, whether the capitalists or the communists or the good guys or the bad guys, I mean, in fact, yes, the more we learn, the more you learn, it's the same picture.
Yeah, it's the same picture. They're both doing the same thing. They're both relying upon disasters and strong emotions. And the
Yeah.
communists did themselves. Obviously, communists did what they do, right, which is kill massive amounts of people directly that won't do what do what they're told, right?
Yes. Yes. They're
And
both
this is a
factory
bad
driven.
right,
Yeah.
right. This is a bad thing, and so the only thing the capitalists have to do is say, well, you don't want to be communist, do you? I mean, that seems to be the go-to. Well, you're just a commie. It's like you can't say that to everybody who has an objection to to guardrails on run amok you know loans and or predatory loans and you know anti-regulation, completely anti-regulation, not completely anti-regulation. See, even this is hard to describe
Right.
because everybody's so used to talking in a this or a that. The people who promote these riots, and they are promoted, or the people who infiltrate them and do things like throw bombs at policemen, um, they know this is the natural tendency of people is to want to take a side very clearly,
Yes.
and so they'll
These are
do
they're
things.
kind of battle orations. I mean, battle orations, and we have them from all of history, and they have a similar character of our side is the heroic side, and the enemy is
Yeah,
monstrous.
Yeah, or as Norm
Monsters
Macdonald said
versus
it
heroes.
best. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Norm Macdonald said it best, right? It's like it says here, right here in this history book, that the good guys won, right?
Yes.
What are the odds?
What
Every
are the
time,
odds?
I mean, I mean, good comedy is just such a good commentary on society that way, because you could say it so succinctly. But that's what's going on here, and why I can't really express myself very well, because there's so much going on just in this one picture here. It's not even a photograph, right? It's
Right.
just somebody's drawing memories of what happened on that day.
The guys, the man
Yeah,
speaking, and the
and the
fires,
bomb
and
and
the
the bomb going off.
sides, and the bomb going off.
Yeah, and yeah, there's a lot. There were a lot of players involved in that. There's a lot of players involved in what's going on in Los Angeles. What you see, this is my guess. I don't have any secret knowledge. What you see on TV is just the surface stuff.
Oh yeah, well, it's literally street theater, right? And so
Yeah,
I mean,
Cafe
it's
B
interesting that the Opera House one was literally over theater. Okay,
was
let's move
literally
on
over
to the next
theater.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, now what do we have now?
So that is the Seattle
Seattle.
and
Yeah.
anti-Chinese labor riots of
Oh my.
1886.
Okay.
So this was a big deal. The Chinese came in droves, and they worked ridiculous hours for ridiculously low pay. The people who had come before them, mostly Irish, couldn't compete with them. It wasn't all the Irish in Seattle that were anti-Chinese labor. Um, some of them actually tried to defend them and protect them. This is a picture of the Chinese being rounded up and forced onto ships, being sent home. Go back home, literally. Get out of here,
When
right?
was this again? Say it again.
1886 in
1886.
Seattle. All of the Chinese were kicked out of the city, or they tried to kick them all out of the city. I think they succeeded for the most part. Wasn't just Seattle; it was all of the Pacific Northwest.
Hmm.
This might have happened more than once. It was organized. Again, a labor organization had something to do with this. In Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and I think Northern California might have been involved somewhat. But the famous one in Seattle, this picture, uh, yeah, it got ugly. It happened over a couple of days. Members of the city were trying to stop it. Um, I remember seeing a plaque in St. James Cathedral, the very top of First Hill in Seattle, showing the bell that was used to warn the Chinese that the mob was coming, that they were trying to
Oh
help
wow.
help them. They were trying to stop it, right? And it wasn't just warning the Chinese; it was warning the people who had said they were going to help them, including the sheriffs. The sheriffs were not in on this. This was a mob. This was a labor. This was an organized labor mob.
So wait, did you get any backstory? The Chinese are here after China has dealt with the opium. They've been in opium wars against the British for the
Well, yeah, well,
19th
the
century.
Chinese have been coming over for decades to work on
Right,
railroads,
right.
and
But
and
they must have been recruited. People don't just show up, right?
well, what tends to happen with large immigrant groups is they recruit their own family members. Come on, there's plenty of work here,
Right.
and they go and work.
But
That's how
I know
most of them got
from
here.
there's this movie again, the German movie Heimat. There's a episode or series part of it set in the 19th century in Germany, and there were recruiters coming over from like Brazil, trying to get the
Uh-huh.
German. So we get German migration to South America as
Yes,
well as up here, and
in Texas. Yeah.
yeah, they people don't just like up and leave and never go back and never talk to their families again. They get enticed and to come over as labor.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. And it was successful in that they found lots of work. They didn't get lots of money, but it created a lot of resentment. You
Right.
know, there was no minimum wage back then, so you had to compete with other people for jobs, and they were willing to work for almost nothing. Right. So there's always somebody who's got it worse than you.
Well, and that the Irish back in the 1840s in Manchester, the Irish were the ones that were undercutting the English
Right.
wages, right? Okay, so now we have
Right.
the Chinese undercutting the Irish wages.
Right. It's like, how low can you
We're
go?
getting a theme here again.
Yes. Yeah, somebody will always undercut, right? And then there's always going to be a business owner that's going to be, oh yeah, bring it on. Bring in more. Bring in more. We need people to do this. We need people to pick fruit.
Well, and I mean, this is why the capitalist free traders are, of course, the ones that are most eager to have this kind of movement. and the
Yes.
communists. Yes. So Rogue Wave is saying, making me want to reread The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. Yes, like everybody,
Oh.
definitely read that one, and everybody's the who are the anarchists and who are the detectives.
Sometimes they're the same person
All
in
right.
some stories.
Do you have more on this one, or should we move on?
We can move on.
Okay.
And
All right.
so,
Now, a bomb explosion at Attorney General's home starts a nationwide roundup of anarchists.
yes, this was 1919, right? So I didn't catch whether it was the Attorney General of the state or the Attorney General of the United States, but yeah, pretty violent. It got in starting in the 1920s.
Well, I'm interested. All of these riots are coming after Riot 1919, right? These are all coming in the United States after wars in
After
Europe.
World War One. Yes, it comes after World War One, right? Well, it tends to create movements of people too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't think they found who did that one. Let's see. Oh no, system household
Nationwide.
injured.
So the anarchists are blamed for like the Sarajevo bombs in Serbia and such. Yeah, if you want to
Yeah,
know
what,
more about what happened in World War One in Germany, Simon Winder's book on the German speaking lands is excellent, because you finally get a sense of why Serbia mattered to the Austro-Hungarians.
oh, I have not read that. I should. Yeah,
I'm just in the sort of big picture of things. There's always more to read, guys, and there's
always,
and no, and the thing is,
always.
in our exercise of scouring the internet for the mosaic, we keep finding new pieces, and as I'm demonstrating, I hope this is all a demonstration, just like Hooke did with his telescopes. We're reading that for our poetry writing right now. That no matter how much history you know, there can always be another piece that suddenly shifts the whole story.
Yeah,
And that it can be frustrating for people who are not practicing. I mean, this, I think, is one of the things we're learning with these exercises. Like, wait a minute, so you mean the riots that happened in 2020 and 1965 and whatever had backstory, right?
right.
And the
Yeah,
backstory, you end up with the endless backstory, and the people at the time of the previous riots knew about these events, right? That you're always playing leapfrog, I guess, with people's memory.
yeah. Certainly, people who are community organizers know the history of this stuff, and they egg people on because they've seen it work.
Well, and
They've seen it
it was in their
destabilize
own
areas.
lifetimes, right? They remember it. Maybe they participated, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
History braids. I don't think maybe that, yes, history doesn't really repeat so much as braid.
Yeah, yeah. Picking up an old thread and weaving it in
Yeah,
with a new one.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just included these to show some headlines that were going on because people are looking at a lot of headlines today, and maybe they're shocked because maybe
Uh,
they're young and they haven't seen a lot of this. There has been more than probably is normal in a short time span between 2020 and 2025, right? But it's just 2025, 2020 was BLM, right? And then there was, well, you're going to see a few of them coming up here, but I wanted to show some.
one of our people in the chat, welcome RKO Venom, says, "Old ladies. Do you mean us? You better depend on us, because without the old ladies around, you have no memory of
I'm okay
anything."
with that.
Yeah, it's like we're your safeguards against complete insanity. Without us and our
Yeah,
interminable memories, what would you
I
be?
know. I know.
You'd be trapped forever in the 21st century. We're here to tell you
one of
about
those,
we're here to tell you about the 20th.
yeah, I'm one of those annoying old ladies because I have like no short-term memory, but I remember things from like 70 years ago. Or will when I'm 80, I guess.
Yes, we can't go back that far yet, but just give us time, right?
Yeah.
But
I'll
no, but
remember it in detail.
this is all no this the thing is, riots are often, participated in by the young who don't
Yeah.
remember the previous
I
riot, but they're
don't know
often
any better.
encouraged by
Yeah.
those who do. Hmm.
Yeah. And I can remember the Occupy Wall Street. I don't have any of those pictures in there.
Hmm.
There was this big Occupy Wall Street movement where they were going to, I don't know, show up and pretend to occupy Wall Street. All the traders just went home and worked from their office. I don't know. But some woman got her laptop stolen, and she was interviewed, and she was shocked. Why would somebody do this? I thought everybody who came here had the best of intentions. That's why we're all here. And I felt kind of sorry for her being that really stupid. It's like, you have lived a very sheltered life if you think everybody that you meet that shares your opinion is a good person that shares your opinion in one area, or that if they show up, it must be because they have good intentions and not because they want to take advantage. Large gatherings of people are taken advantage of by people who want to use them as props, and they'll start trouble.
Clip that and save it. Say it again.
Large groups of people will be used by other people to start trouble, and they'll just manipulate movements.
And you said as props, right?
These
riots are props for other people's designs.
for other people's issues, for other people's projects, right? Projects like remaking America, right? Didn't Obama wanted to do something like that? Right? He wanted to remake it, or what did Hillary Clinton wanted to do? It was a what did she wanted?
I have that. Well, Build Back Better was Biden's thing, wasn't it?
Oh, it was old. No,
but, no, Hillary's like, it feels like she's always wanted to be at the head of a riot, but she's never been in the right place at the right time. So it's interesting with the anarchists, right? It's
she is, and people just reject her because she's horrible.
Well, we're not doing Hillary right now. But so with the anarchists, right? Antifa. Are they technically anarchists? Do they call themselves anarchists? I mean, it's
they call themselves anti-fascists, but what does that even mean? I mean, who isn't? Who is? If you're not a fascist,
they're from the 20s.
The fascisti. What was it? Who was it that fought? I think the fascists were fighting the communists, and the Nazis kind of allied with the fascists who were also fighting the communists. It's very complicated.
That's actually accurate. It's the fascists. The fascists are allied with the socialists, the Nazis against the communists, but they all hate each other, right? It's actually
they all hated each other, right?
Well, so we have the communists for real setting up something in 1848, so they get practice that. The anarchists, I mean, the one thing I know about the anarchists is from G.K. Chesterton's The Man Who Was Thursday, where in fact there's no anarchists. Sorry, spoiler alert. But
no, I haven't read it yet, darn it.
No, but the problem being you get in. I mean, Chesterton is making a joke of it, saying everybody's suspecting other people of being anarchists, and yet there were I in my troll through what Prime Video can offer me in the movies of the 60s and 70s. 80s. I'm working up to the 90s now, but there was a very interesting movie that I watched with, I forgot what the actor is. He's famous. It was set in the 20s, and it's about the Assassin's Club or something. I forget how it was, and they have a sword fight, and it was a premise that it was kind of like a G.K. Chesterton premise that there's these assassins from all different countries in Europe, and they're working together to destabilize the government by collecting all of the heads of state at this one castle, and they're going to drop a bomb on the castle.
Oh, hold on, I saw this one. It's a recent movie, right?
No, it's from the 60s.
It was from the 60s because it almost sounds like
oh well, there is there's one that's the Avengers that's similar.
No, there was one that was like it was a prequel to the Kingsmen.
Kingsmen, like that's it, not the Avengers. Kingsmen. Yeah, that. No, okay, but these are tropes, right? And they're getting them from in the teens and 20s, which is how we ended up with World War I, allegedly, because of the assassination of the Archduke and his wife by the anarchist. But they're bomb throwing. It's like they're throwing bombs, and that's what Chesterton is always, making fun of us, like man with whiskers throwing bombs. Are they actually even real? But there were people that were throwing bombs, and I think that's when the Molotov cocktail comes in as a device.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that was during the early 20th century. But yeah, Yes, these are the anarchists. Um, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to destabilize, right? They're trying to destabilize political systems and cities and get people angry enough and scared enough that they'll make changes, and then they can
Regime
take,
change,
right, and
as
then
they
they can take
say.
advantage. Right, there's profit and chaos, right?
For
That's what they
those who
want.
are egging on the bomb throwers. Yeah, so Rogue Wave is
Right.
saying human psychology changes drastically in a mob. People will do extreme things they never otherwise be capable of justifying to themselves. This is true, right? The problem of,
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that in in COVID where people were doing things that you cannot believe. It's interesting now watching people remembering it from it does 5 years ago seems like a long time ago,
It does.
and
It's
yet
not a long time ago, but
it's
it
not
feels
that
like it.
long, but the sort of rupture that we went through with people's willingness to go along with the COVID restrictions is like a reverse mob. It was the mob of the
Yes.
online.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one. Okay. Street explosion kills 30, injures. Okay, I
300.
can't, I've clipped this off to make the pictures bigger, so I can't read the whole
Sure.
thing.
So Wall Street explosion kills 30, injures 300. Morgan office hit. JP Morgan.
Mm.
Bomb pieces found. Toronto fugitives sent warnings here.
Ooh.
This is from the New York Times, Friday, September 17th, 1920. So before September 11th, 2001, that was the largest mass murder in New York history. A
30.
bomb that went off.
The bomb that went off. Okay.
That went off, and there are still marks in the buildings that were around at the time. There's still chunks missing out of it from this bomb. It was a big bomb,
Huh.
and it was sent in. It was sent in by a car, kind of like Oklahoma City, right? Somebody sent a carriage in, so obviously the horse is dead too, filled up with explosives and set it off in front of the door. And they don't.
I hope everybody's feeling clever about being so edgy and novel. If you're
Yeah,
watching, be embarrassed.
yeah. And this one, I don't think they ever found who did it
They ran away
or
to
found out who
Canada.
did it. Uh, don't know.
Toronto
Don't
fugitive
know.
sent warnings. Or no, somebody from Toronto sent warnings about the bomb.
Sent warnings here. Yeah, a fugitive. Yeah, Toronto fugitive sent warnings. So it could have been somebody from Canada that came down to do it and then went back. You
Hmm.
know, but yeah, it could have been an anarchist. Toronto was a huge industrial city back then. That's the kind of place they'd like to hang out in. They weren't farmers. You know?
Right. No, the thing is, the mobs belong in cities, right? They're a city
Yeah.
phenomenon. You have to have
Hmm.
a city population for them to and this was we talked about this, gee, all the way last year, with the campus encampments that
Hmm.
they needed the campuses to work because they needed to be in a kind of we talked about this last year. Remember the architectural space that makes an encampment meaningful. So likewise, these
Right.
riots, I mean, it's interesting watching. Well, we have to get to the one that's going on right now, but um, streets, right? They need streets. They happen in streets. They're a phenomenon
Yeah.
of the streets.
Well, it's their stage.
Yes,
Yeah. It's a spectacle.
buildings and streets. You need buildings and streets for these things
Hmm.
to function.
Hmm. Yep.
All right, let's see. Okay. This is a man sitting by a car and some policemen.
Right. He's been arrested. The city's on fire. These are the Watts riots of 1965, and it was started because of a case of accused police brutality. They were using it was what do they call unnecessary force, and it was the 60s. It was the civil rights movement, and it was used to press for a riot, right? Anger, where the flames were fanned, the flames of anger were fanned, and it turned into literal flames. I don't
Mm.
think Watts ever recovered from it. I don't think it still has in
Where
50
it Watts
something
is in
years.
Los Angeles.
Watts is a neighborhood in Los Angeles. It was a predominantly black neighborhood in Los Angeles. I think it still is.
Mm.
And although a lot of the Mexicans that have moved up here have taken over those neighborhoods and turned them from Black American neighborhoods to Mexican neighborhoods. But in 1965, it was it was a race riot, right? The police were being brutal. So we're going to riot. And they did. And they burned businesses and looted. And this person looks like he's been arrested. His hands are behind his back there. And they're just sitting there watching a whole block burn down.
Mm. Yeah, so this struck you because the fires were so bad?
The fires looked like, yeah, what we're seeing in Los Angeles right now when they're setting cars on fire and they're using accelerants to set the grass on fire, which, if you know anything about Los Angeles, is devastating. The entire city could go up in flames that way. It's very dry. It's
Well,
a
it
desert.
nearly did in January.
Yeah, and they're trying to do it again. So these look like Mexican illegal aliens were spraying accelerant all over the grass and lighting it on fire. Not just one or two of them. There were like a dozen of them doing this, right? And
So go ahead.
supposedly this big protest is going on, and it's being encouraged by the mayor and the governor, who have decided to take the side of, illegal aliens being able to come in here and just stay, without regard to immigration laws. And the federal government said, we're going to go and start deporting people. They're upholding the law, the federal law, which every state has to follow. Similar to what happened in 1794. You can't just decide you don't like this law and you start attacking, ICE officers, which is what they were doing. So they were setting these fires to distract and tie up, the emergency services personnel, is my guess. And it looked very similar. So yeah, the city's burning there. It's a riot. It looked very similar. Yes, it's happened before. This is for a slightly different reason. The Watts riot was over, it started as a protest against police brutality, and it quickly turned into a riot. And probably just as quickly, I'm guessing, I would have to ask people who were adults at that time. If you had sympathy, you probably lost it then by doing this. So who started the fires, right?
Oh, because so much of the neighborhood burned as well.
Yeah. Just burned down, right? So there's a lot of things that could be going on here, but one thing is certain: it's the same thing over and over again. People have a grievance, they gather to protest, somebody shows up and starts lighting things on fire. It's the same thing over and over again.
There's a sort of, the structure of a mob here. The 19th century riots had instigators, right?
Yes.
The communists were training each other in doing this. They theorized the need for a revolution and were trying to start it. And the anarchists were doing it on purpose as well. The things that have been coming out over the last few years about how things played in the 60s, right? We're losing all of our good guys. It's like the side of, isn't the civil rights? Aren't we supposed to be on the side of the civil rights? And yet there's a lot of things that are happening that even in the civil rights movement are starting to feel like, hey, wait a minute.
But the communists were also infiltrating the civil rights movement, for sure. I mean, it wouldn't be surprised a bit if they were behind those fires there, right? They want us destabilized. There is some evidence, I think Data Republican has brought this up, that the CCP is involved in the riots going on in LA right now. And that would be very similar to what happened in the 60s, when people had genuine grievances and they had protests and they were infiltrated. LA, what makes LA different is that there's no genuine grievance going on here. People came in here illegally. Nobody denies it.
You're jumping ahead. Okay, let's so you want to talk about the nail one, so let's keep going. Okay, now we have Hudson Shoes. That's completely, the factory is totally gone, and there's some firemen in front of it.
So that's also the Watts riots. It's just another picture of they
I did not realize they were that bad. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. I always heard of them. So the ones I picked weren't even necessarily the more famous ones, because this was 1965.
This is just ordinary life. How many times does a city burn down?
A lot, right? We didn't even get to 1968. I even left that out altogether, because that was after Martin Luther King died, and there were riots in every city in the country.
Oh man!
Right. So Watts was unique because it was an event that happened in Watts. So that's why I put it there, just to show people this happens again and again and again. It isn't
Right.
necessarily something spectacular like, oh my goodness, somebody's been assassinated, let's riot because we're really upset and angry. No, this was specific to this city. And there were a lot of things happening in California in the 60s that were destabilizing it. A lot of it was communist infiltration of genuine movements. Right, the civil rights movement was a genuine movement, and it was
See, I've been reading
obviously.
things that are suggesting it wasn't.
Well, I'm saying the civil rights movement was legitimate in that it had legitimate grievances,
Right.
right?
Well,
And
the problem, no, sorry, not that the legitimate grievances. Sorry, I forgot what I was thinking.
I think maybe were you going to say that it wasn't organic?
Yes, right.
Okay,
That problem of what's an organic. So the kinds of things I'm thinking of is like we're looking at the city fires. London had this terrible fire in 1666
oh, I
that
saw that today. The superimposed image, the
oh
huge area
yeah.
of
Oh,
one. Oh, it's amazing.
wow,
It's,
yes, exactly. A lot the city burned, right? And cities burned
yeah,
regularly in the past because
mhm,
they didn't have electricity, so they had,
right,
fires for everything. You were always someone
and they were
went
made of
pointing out
timber.
that you were always within, a few feet of a fire if you were indoors because you had to have no light otherwise, or cooking or heat or anything. And so fire was a terrible danger constantly.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I've seen a lot of old house. I've toured a lot of old houses in this country, and they still have separate kitchen houses for that very reason,
mm.
to stop a fire from spreading to the living quarters.
No, but I mean, the, the sort of retrospective and thinking through all of this, you start realizing that more of these moments had leaders
Hmm.
instigating things than
Yeah,
people were aware of at the time. So,
right.
the people get
Well, because
swept
it's a
up
mob.
into it. Yeah, you get swept, the
That's it.
mobile, you get swept up into the
Yeah.
mob and you don't know who started it. But what I'm wondering, it's like fires start in a particular place. Mobs get generated and you can
Yeah.
feel like there's often efforts to create mobs that don't happen, right? They're sort of, you can have an instigator who throws the bomb and people don't respond. So why some mobs take and others don't is interesting.
Yes. Well, I would think the
They're hoping
more.
that some people are hoping there's going to be more tomorrow. No kings. They're playing at being
Yeah.
hyenas. No king, la 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 la. I can't
Yeah.
believe they
Right.
can't hear that in their slogan. We're the hyenas. We're going to be standing with Scar. No king, no king.
Yeah.
Fools. Okay, sorry.
Right. And Scar's the
I'm
king.
getting
Yeah.
triggered here. Okay, here's
Scar
more
wants to be the
fire.
king.
Is this still Watts? Wow, this was
Nope.
bad. Okay.
This is Newark, New Jersey,
Okay.
1967, the year of my birth.
65
And
was mine. So we're both mob born.
yeah, my family lived maybe a mile away from that,
Oh
right
my.
there. At the time, it was
When you
happening.
were a baby?
When I was a baby, right? I was born next door in Pennsylvania. Yeah, but because my father was in the army, he was stationed there.
Mm.
But the whole family was from Jersey City, which is, it's, if you look at a map, they're all very close to each other. That's very close to where they lived. And this again wasn't the biggest riot. That was 1968. That was a
What was
year later.
happening in 1967?
Okay, I did take notes on this one
Very good.
because I was unaware. So this is Newark, 1967. Same thing. It was a case of police brutality, right? So the issue was, it's June 12th, 1967, the arrest and beating of John Smith, similar to Rodney King, which we'll
Mm.
discuss in a minute,
Okay.
right? It was again, it was the civil rights era. It was a lot of people using a lot of inflammatory rhetoric, and it started a riot. And it looks like they burned down about 4 or 5 city blocks there, which represent people's businesses and homes. And yeah, let's see. The rest was a flashpoint leading to protests that escalated into riots. After rumors spread that Smith had died in custody, he was alive. He didn't die, he was alive. Somebody spread a rumor he died to start a riot,
Wow.
and it worked. Over 6 days, from July 12th to 17th, violence erupted with looting, arson, and clashes between residents, police, and the National Guard. The riots resulted in 26 deaths, 700 injuries, widespread damage.
Wow.
26 deaths based on a rumor that the guy was beaten to death who wasn't. So yes,
Well, this
somebody
is
took
like the
advantage
George
of it.
Floyd riots. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Except George Floyd was actually dead. He wasn't,
Right.
in the opinion of the coroner, he wasn't killed, right? He wasn't killed by the police. He was killed from a fentanyl overdose.
Right.
But this guy, he was beaten by police and he didn't die. But somebody said, oh, he died. And then they used that rumor to start a riot that killed 26 people. Now, what was the point of that? Newark, I don't know that it ever fully recovered from that. I don't think it did, because that's when quote, white flight started, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, people are fleeing for their lives, and somehow somebody injects racism into even that. Like, how dare you try to protect yourself and your family by leaving?
Well, they were using the racism in the 60s to foment this kind of thing.
They were, they
It
were,
was
they
an
were
active,
totally,
it was a
they were,
purposeful tactic,
yeah,
just like I mean, just go back to,
right.
I like that you started with the Astor Opera House. It's like fighting over who did Shakespeare better,
You'll fight over anything, really.
basically.
Anything,
And you said
anything can
like,
be.
so and this I'm wondering about. It's like people are burning down their own neighborhoods in
Yes, they're
these
burning down their
riots.
own neighborhoods, which makes no sense at all. It didn't make any sense. It's like, why would you burn down the street your grandma lives on? It's not rational, and it doesn't satisfy me to say, well, that's just the madness of a mob. I don't
Yeah,
I
that
don't buy
doesn't
it. There's something
satisfy
else
me
going
either.
on. There's something else going on there.
Hmm. All
Hmm.
right. This is a man with a gun in the buildings in rubble.
Also New York. That's a
Wow.
looks like it looks like a
That's
National Guardsman.
amazing.
So that's the next day. Yeah. The
So
block's
old
gone.
ladies, we're not even old enough to remember this because we were
No.
babies.
I wasn't even born yet. I was still yet to be born. I had not arrived out into the world yet. My mom was pregnant with me at the time.
Mm. Well,
So,
I was around, and I don't remember the
yeah,
Watts riots. But
yeah.
the
So
thing
yeah,
is,
this is just one
our
of them.
parents would know about these things. So
They
it,
do. They did
yeah,
know about these things, and the thing is, it happened so flipping often
in the
that
60s,
it
in that
just,
time, yeah.
yeah, the 60s, the 70s, right?
How does this
And
explain Gen X? There must be somewhere in there that our psychology comes out of this. Oh yeah, the
stop your
city can burn down
stop
at
your
any
whining and
time.
yeah, stop your whining and get over it,
Right.
right?
Our
Yeah,
parents well, I don't know. I mean, I
yeah,
mean, it is interesting to, sort of reflect on being born into. They were in Vietnam at this point, because Johnson.
yeah.
I've been hearing some, the things that are coming out. Never mind about who killed JFK, but that President Johnson was, and the CIA were directly behind the attack on the Liberty.
Oh no,
The
I hadn't heard that.
people setting things with false flag to get us into war with Egypt. Right? It's like
Well, I
this.
mean, the Gulf of Tonkin was a big lie,
Yep,
right? They
yep.
finally admitted that.
But
They admitted
but
that
this is,
25 years
how
ago.
much are these? If they'll do that to set up a war somewhere else, what's going on with these riots in cities?
Right, right. They're destabilizing the cities, and people did move out of them, and now they're going to remake them into 15-minute cities. That's a long game, because
Mm-hmm.
that's we're talking 50 years. But would I put it past them? No, no, I would not. I met people in Boston when I was living there that remember when the West End was flattened, when the people were forced out of it, and the city flattened it and remade it into a sterile mid-rise, just ugly place, right? And all the families are gone, and they're still sad about it. They're still, because they still remember it. And this happened in the early 60s.
Well, this is what Jane Jacobs was writing her book about, the 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 death of great American cities.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it
Specifically, and
actually
she
hurt
talked
real
about
people.
the one of the inns in Boston, and that they managed at that point to keep it, but maybe
Mm.
what they burned it down later.
Well, no, the city raised it on purpose. They purposely
Wow.
moved everybody out and said, no, these are all condemned. All these buildings are bad for you. You need to leave now. So, but they busted up an entire cohesive, culturally cohesive neighborhood. I think the only thing that survived was maybe a church or two. That was it. But there was no people around there to go to them anymore because they moved them all out.
Well, they did that. They're doing the same things with the interstate. Um,
Yes.
like Chicago gets those interstates through its neighborhoods in
Yep.
that period,
Seattle,
which
Seattle had the same
involves
thing in the 50s.
destroying lots of homes, breaking up neighborhoods because you run
Yep.
this road through the middle of them.
Yep.
So I mean, Paris had similar sort of reorganizing. Les Miserables talks about that because it has famously some of the long, well, famously because I listened to the whole thing and I'm like, wow, this is famous. Um, the description of what Paris was like. Jean Valjean is looking at it and either remembering it, or the narrator is telling you this was the Paris that Jean Valjean was in, and it's the Paris before the great clearances and the boulevards and there
Mm,
had been all these close neighborhoods, and they're gone.
clearances. They did that for Central Park too. Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, there
People
were
are so
clearances.
inconvenient. It's like you want
Yep.
us to live in your cities so that you can tax us and make it and be powerful, and on the other hand, you don't like us messing up your buildings. A
Yeah.
who's behind this? Okay, um, a a white building burning with lots of red cars around it.
So now we're skipping ahead to 1992. Still LA. These are the Rodney King verdict LA
Why does LA
riots.
have so many riots? Are they bored because they don't have enough winter? I mean, what
I
is
don't
it?
know. I don't know. But I actually
If they
didn't
have
even,
it's
I
like it's
remember this.
72
I didn't,
degrees and sunny all the time, and the occasional earthquake. What are you going to do? If
yes.
Yeah, okay. Tell us about.
This, so for all you youngins out there, okay, I was in my early 20s when this happened, and the cities around the country were on high alert because there were threats of mobs and riots. Why? I don't know why there would have been one in Seattle or Boston or New York or anywhere else, but there we are. Rodney King it was caught on tape. Somebody filmed it, being beaten by the cops. He was resisting arrest and he was being beaten. At least that was the cops, and the cops were acquitted, right?
Well, because
And
he was very big,
he was huge. He was a huge
and
man.
he was on some kind of mood altering substance.
Right, but he was moving very slowly on the tape, and so people thought he was being abused. And honestly, I don't know enough about it.
Yeah,
I just the tape didn't look good. Okay, just like the George Floyd tape didn't
right,
look good, but there's other information you don't know, right?
right.
Like did he swallow a handful of pills right before then? Yes, he did because he didn't want to get caught with them,
Mm.
right?
George
And
Floyd
I don't know
or Rodney King.
George Floyd.
Mm.
Rodney King, I don't know anything about. All I remember is that there was this tape. He was beaten because he was resisting arrest, and and then the cops were put on trial and they were acquitted. And after they
PCP, is
were,
that it? Was it PCP?
I don't know. I don't know. PCP would have been a lot stronger. I don't think he would have been lethargic. But see, I don't know. So I
That's what
don't.
I
I don't
okay,
want to
guys,
say.
chat, look it up. That they the claim was they had to use the force that they did because he was very big and he was berserk because of the drugs that he'd taken. So
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. I mean,
they were
he did have a
acquitted, right? And then
problem.
they were acquitted, and then the city
Yeah.
rioted because the
Right.
cops were
And
acquitted.
to Mr. King, who's rest in peace, I think he's deceased now, to
Yeah.
his credit, he was very upset about these riots and was begging people to stop,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Because please, can't we all just get along became a funny meme, but why should it? I mean, he was very sincere. He was sincerely heartbroken watching this,
Mm,
because it was his city. He didn't want to see it burned down. He didn't want to see people hurt. And
right.
lots of people were hurt. And people were being dragged from their cars and beaten, and the whole blocks were being burnt down. But why? It was as if to say, well, if you don't give me the verdict I want, we're gonna burn the city down. No justice, no peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remember, that's still being repeated,
Did they say that
which
in
is,
those riots?
I think they did, yeah. And well, that's it. Give me the right verdict, or I'll burn the city down, which is what a lot of people think. The reason that Chauvin was put in jail, that he wasn't acquitted, was because of that, because they were threatening to like hurt and kill people if he got acquitted, and the jurors felt responsible for it. So this is a reason to put down riots very quickly. It's not because of capitalism, like like the Astor Opera House commentary said. It had nothing to do with it. This again was used to destabilize an entire area. I think it was probably they were trying to use it to destabilize politically, and it didn't work. It did work later. It did work later with George Floyd. I don't know why, but that was super organized. At least it had that vibe because it made no other sense otherwise. The kinds of things that they did, they being that people, mobs, and elected officials in various cities over the country doing just ridiculous things like, oh, I don't know, tearing down a statue of Frederick Douglass. I mean, it's
Right, I know.
insane.
Excuse me, you're well,
You
no,
know,
they're not symbolically consistent. So,
no, or
uh,
Abraham Lincoln.
yeah.
Yeah, these aren't educated, you know, anarchists. They're not.
Well, you've done a good job of picking a set that I glanced at them before you put them in the slide stack, and it's like, okay, this is great, a lot of riots. But the thing is, they're similar in effect and in lots of the visuals, but
Mhm.
how much of a red thread are we finding through all of these? Is there a long story here, or is this like, I mean, they're cities, right? It's like the one thing is they're cities and streets and buildings, because that's what cities have. And
I think that the people who instigate the arson and the riots and the looting, I think the people that are instigating this, they're doing it to destabilize an area. They're doing this because they're taking advantage of high emotions, right?
right. Well,
And
this is
that's the
what I was saying
similarity.
about not every incident of high emotions ends up with this effect, right? Mobs they're curious how, I think it's like, how hard or easy are they to activate? Um,
Well, they're being advertised for.
Now they are, yeah. So how are
They
we
were
doing
then
with our
too.
stack? Okay, here we have guys, soldiers in jeeps
That's
or
yeah. That's
troop
yeah. So
carriers.
the next couple of pictures are yeah. These are the Rodney King verdict riots, and this was the National Guard that was activated, and I think the U.S. Marines will also have to get activated then too. I think the Army and Marines were also there
So Trump has
trying to.
precedent
Of
sending,
course he
yeah.
does. Yeah. I mean, the people who
It's
say he doesn't
horrible.
are
It's
lying.
unprecedented.
No, oh gosh, no. People listen. Everything the media says right now is a lie, including and the. All right. Don't believe them without checking yourself. Okay. Yeah. George Bush
The old
Sr.
ladies are here to tell you that.
We were there.
We were there.
George Bush Sr. ordered the restoration of order by use of the National Guard. Yes, he did. And it's his legal right to do that. And it's Trump's as president his legal right to do that too. Their
Well, it's
problem is
also
they
his
don't like the fact that Trump's
responsibility,
yeah
right? It's like
they don't like they don't like the fact that he's president and they can't get over it, and so they're just going to keep lying and lying and lying and lying and lying until one of these lies finally sticks. But only it's not going to, because guess what? He doesn't care. He didn't care before. He really doesn't care now.
yeah.
So yeah, that's the National Guard
Okay.
in LA.
The roof
20
Koreans.
rooftop Koreans. Right on, Bill. Right on. I do love this picture. They were defending their businesses,
Mm-hmm.
which were being targeted specifically because they were Korean. This was another case of trying to foment racial hatred. Who was doing it though, right?
This was
Who
in
was
the Rodney
fomenting this?
King riots, right?
During the Rodney King
Yeah.
riots, people were looting. They were specifically trying to loot Korean stores. Now, Koreans owned a lot of businesses. That's one of the things as an ethnic group they do when they move here quite frequently is to open businesses. Um,
Well,
I don't.
I've been in LA a lot in the last year. And there's a big Korean neighborhood, sort of
Mhm.
central. Yeah.
Yeah, there
The
is,
bus
but they own.
the Wilshire bus goes through it.
Right. This wouldn't have been a Korean neighborhood. That doesn't necessarily. They own businesses everywhere.
Okay.
Anywhere there's a lot of traffic, because they're pretty good at guessing how to earn money that way, to make
Right.
money with a lot of traffic. And so they were being targeted because there was a lot of resentment fomenting there and being pushed and promoted uh, against the Koreans. They were accused of being racist and raising prices. And
Mm.
well, gee, I don't know why they'd have to have high prices in a high crime neighborhood. Maybe it's to make up for all the stuff that gets stolen. I don't know, or just insurance because they're in a high crime neighborhood. Either one of those things could be true, but they were targeted and they didn't take it lying down. There's the picture.
So did they actually shoot anybody?
I want to say yes, but I don't know because I didn't look that up.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's the guy on X who's the rooftop Korean.
Tony Moon. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
we need the rooftop Koreans back, and he's like, I'm still here. He's
I'm still here. Yeah,
well,
it
he's
was.
more our age, right?
No, I know
in
he's.
mid
He said
sixties,
they said somewhere out there is a rooftop, a 68-year-old
68. Okay, he's older than we are.
rooftop Korean dusting off his old gun,
Let's
right?
see.
And he answers. He says, "It's never dusty, my friend." Oh, he's oiled and ready. It's pretty awesome.
Well, I mean, it's good. It's a good example of saying it's not just that we're joking about being old. Whoever you are, yes, we know we're old. Um, that yeah, I mean, it's like if you got a variety, everybody, people of all ages are alive right now, and they're overlapping the braid, right? They're overlapping
Yeah,
memories of being in previous events
yeah.
like this. That it's
Hmm.
and so the mobs are going to draw on the young guys because you don't remember the old ones.
That's right. You get them young when they're. It's and this is not an insult. This is not me saying this. Okay, get them when they're young and stupid, meaning uneducated,
Yeah.
meaning they don't hear it, they don't remember, maybe they haven't read about it. The teachers unions make sure that history isn't taught particularly well these days, right? So, oh yeah, I
Well,
think the
history,
teachers.
the problem with history not being taught well is the same as our Bleak House exercise 2 weeks ago, right? It's like
Yeah, yes,
the
same thing.
claim that you can like quantify this kind of thing. It does help to actually like memorize the dates so you can keep all the events in order. Chronology is your friend.
That does help. Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
because it's, it's a tool for showing not just coincidence, but the same things happening at the same time so you can make patterns
Yeah,
and see the threads, right? Guys,
yeah.
this is what we do. We love Data Republican because she's doing it with big
Oh yeah,
data
she's awesome.
sets. That you can't, I mean, learning history as a set of multiple choice questions is ridiculous. it it
Yeah.
so yes, there's so many things that are wrong with the way we think about the problem of understanding.
Yeah, there was a book that came out around the same time of these riots, funny enough.
Mm.
Maybe it's at the same time. Yeah, it was in the early 90s called Citizens. And it was a history of the events surrounding and braided through the French Revolution.
So
And
Simon Schama's, one of Simon Schama's, which I haven't
I couldn't
read.
get I
Yeah.
couldn't get through it because at the very beginning he said I did not write this in chronological order because I don't think history should be taught that way. And I
Uh,
thought that's odd. So I tried to read it, and guess what? History needs to be taught that way. It was really incomprehensible because things build on each other.
right. Yes.
It,
No,
it, can't, it was so
you need the
confusing. I couldn't
before
read
and
it.
after and the what was going on at the same time to get the point. If teaching
Yes,
history as if the chronology doesn't matter, that's the biggest problem for sure.
yes. And it was a problem. That book was not. It just I wanted so badly to read it because I'm interested in French language and history and culture, but I couldn't do it. It was just too. Maybe I'll try it now as I'm older. I don't know. I'll think about it.
Well, those books can be interesting to read if you know the chronology already, and then
Yeah,
there it's
I could
like
see that.
the sort of um
Yes, it's not a primer.
like the art movie that has flashbacks and foreshadowing and all of this.
Hmm.
Kind of like Draco Chemicus, which is hopping around in chronology all over the
Yeah,
place.
we're having fun with that. Yeah,
But it only works if you actually also have some sense of the linear version of
right. And
things.
we're having fun with it artistically. It's not telling people something that literally actually happened.
Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah, we're using that as backdrop kind of.
But it does depend to a certain extent on knowing some of that history. We're gonna have to publish a handbook to go with our poem. Okay, so
Oh
uh,
no, more. It's my retirement project.
I'm never letting you go. Okay.
I
Guy breaking a window.
know. Oh, guy breaking a window. So this again, the riots. This was the looting.
Mm.
This was the looting, and yeah, this I remember this poor old woman being interviewed, and she was crying, and
Mm.
she had a New York accent too. It's like she must have retired there or something, and she said, "I just came out to get food. I can't get food now, you know." And she was confused and scared and by herself. She must have been about 80 something years old.
Mm.
And I think that's what Rodney King was responding to because she became quite famous during those riots. That clip of her being interviewed on the street, and she was like scared and crying and sad because she needed to get food, and all the stores had been looted, and he was responding to her, you know, this tiny little white lady crying by herself on the street, and he said, Can't we all just get along? This is terrible. Please stop doing this, you know." And other people were chasing people down, saying, "Why are you looting? Why are you looting?" And she's covering her face up like, leave me alone," you know, and going off with her pile of stuff, a pile of free stuff, you know. People still had shame back then. This was only 30 years ago, right? 34 years ago,
Yeah.
33. They had shame then. They were still, but they didn't want to get caught. They didn't want to be on television. People are so used to being on television now.
Yes, that's an
They'll,
interesting that the sort of shock of seeing yourself on camera is worn off.
yeah, yeah, it has.
So, I mean,
Yep.
the interesting thing is, for all of this, we're hopping through 200 years of history and riots. Most of the time, this is a feature of the way history is told too. It's like if you tell the history of the Middle Ages as if everything's a massacre, it's like, do you realize that these are like once every century or something, and the,
Yeah,
particular regions could go, for centuries without ever seeing a war. So the feeling of all of American history is one long riot. You could do that. We have nothing but riots, but then you
yeah,
recognize that that's not entirely true either. We've got way more of them than people are remembering.
right,
But on the other
right.
hand,
Which is why this doesn't look organic. And you start
yeah.
looking for the similarities.
Well, but I mean, the other reason it doesn't look organic is for the most part, people, do pretty well in cities. This I
Mhm.
constantly point this out, right? It's like it's a miracle that millions of us can live together, mostly and treat indeed mostly
Yes,
peacefully.
mostly fiery, but mostly peaceful. Yes.
So when we're not being peaceful, it's very strange and alarming and worrisome. But you sort of, what does it mean? Okay, here we have someone in the street and smoke and
Ah, yes. This is the World Trade Organization riots, Seattle, 1999.
oh,
Now, you remember
okay.
1886 when they had the anti-Chinese labor
In
riots?
Seattle, yes.
Right. That was a direct result of international movement of people for the production of goods.
Mm.
So this is the World Trade Organization, which is about international trade. Another riot. We don't want international trade. We don't like it. It's odd that it would have been a riot against international trade because the kinds of people that were rioting would probably call themselves as socialists.
Mm.
Some of them might be communists, right? But yes, international trade is bad, but they definitely wouldn't they wouldn't be pro capitalist. I guess they would be anti capitalism, but these would be the same people that would be today rioting against Trump's tariffs. So it's kind of strange.
Sorry, lost it. So the people in these World Trade Organization riots were rioting
They were
against.
they were writing against free trade. They were writing against international trade and business because there was a meeting of the World Trade Organization in Seattle, and they were
So you're saying that these
yes,
these same people now would be rioting against Trump for
yes,
limiting
because they're socialists and
trade.
communists, and we're against Trump. So it doesn't really make any sense.
No, you're right. I mean, the feel of like we're the okay. So one, to recognize the communists and the capitalists, you know, square off like soccer teams in
Yes,
this these
or so you think.
scenarios. Well, but
and that's coming up soon.
there isn't a consistency in which side people are riding on. You're right.
There's going to be consistency, and the second to the last slide, but we'll get there.
Okay, now we
But I
got
want you to,
the
yeah, I want you to
the
remember that one
car.
though.
Okay, the guy standing on the police car.
Okay, so this is, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So
This is
this is the
BLM. You said
Black
this
Lives
is
Matter riots 2020 in LA. Again, LA, right? So this image looks very similar to the images you're seeing this week, right? Police cars being attacked and vandalized. It
it's
just
a
kind of a
trope.
violent, yeah, a violent free for all, right? But it's being egged on. Anybody who's got any kind of a grievance against authority would be out here. What's strange is that, you know, Karen Bass, who apparently was trained by communists in Cuba,
Mm-hmm.
is the mayor of Los Angeles. Is denying that there's any violence going on. I guess she doesn't know about this little thing called the iPhone and the internet and television.
She is older than
Uh,
we are. Maybe she hasn't caught up yet.
how old do you have to be? Okay, Gavin Newsom, same thing, and he's. I'm sorry, this is just too much. I just don't want to get started on Gavin Newsom, but they both for their own reasons hate Trump or never Trumpers. Never Trumpers are not exclusive to socialists and communists and Democrats. There are plenty of Republicans who are also never Trumpers who probably are not unhappy to see a scene like this unfolding
Mm.
because it's his executive authority sending ICE agents to deport illegal aliens that is causing this.
Oh, so this is so we have the reminder of this one that we've seen
Right.
in the
This is the
BLM riots of
reminder. Right.
2020. And
Right.
everybody,
Right.
most everybody right now having this conversation remembers 2020, right? How long ago was that? Uh
Yeah.
and
5 years ago. Right.
I mean it is interesting to me that for I guess those 60s riots seem to like replicate fairly quickly. But
Yes.
those depending when you could see them on television and
Yeah.
the anti-war protests were also fueled by things that people were seeing on television. But
Yeah.
television was much more curated than our social media feeds, obviously.
Yeah, I'm looking at all the people in this scene from this is the 2020 BLM riots in LA, and I don't think any of them were alive in 1992 during the Rodney King
Right.
riots. They all look really young. So yeah, that they're being egged on to do this again by community organizers.
But the thing is, there again,
Um,
in their life, it's not yet again, right? They wouldn't have seen it before. Although
correct.
I mean, there were the like the Berkeley burning in 2017 when Milo was supposed to talk there.
Yeah, that was specific just to the campus though, right? Or did it spread out?
It spread into the town. So
Okay.
but I mean and I think the only thing set on fire was that generator, but there were businesses looted and some windows broken
Yeah.
and things. There was building damage and stuff. So yeah, this feeling of it is the case that since 2016, 2017, it feels like the riots come every 4 years.
Yeah, they're coming closer together. It's similar to the
But they're too
1920s.
organized. There was
Yes.
obviously completely. I mean, Data Republican has shown
Right.
the feeding of money into
Yeah.
this. That you get you've got some posters and such coming up.
Yes,
Going
I
back
do.
to so Karen Bass saying that these are and the media all saying these are the mostly peaceful and
Yeah.
nonviolent. I heard I I feel like I've said this before, and I don't know when I was saying it on camera recently, but and I feel like I saw it in one of Mike Benz's videos talking through some of the CIA documents that
I haven't seen that
he was
yet.
reading. It was one that was on X, and he was reading through some things that were actually made public in the 90s. But
Yeah.
you don't until you start seeing enough of the patterns, we're not going to see the patterns.
Right.
The internet is great for mosaic hunters, as we are.
Hmm.
Mosaic
Yeah.
cruisers. We cruise looking for the connections, right, and tie the knots. And one of the things he said in the CIA programming documents, starting from I mean right after World War II, but definitely in the 50s. I mean, one, they're definitely creating and funding programs through the universities and the NGOs. Benz has been pretty good on showing up with these
Mm,
NGOs, right? They're funded through the foundations in cooperation with CIA purposes, to create, area studies programs so that you can go in and know the culture. I mean, this is, oh, I know,
yeah.
it's in the video I did with the guy who was asking me about Kissinger and telling us that we don't know any history. We're here, old ladies are here to tell you history. Um,
Right.
that you need the area studies because you need to go into these countries because you don't know their history. But now I realize that that's code for we need to get in there and figure out where the pressure points are in their social dynamics
Mm,
so that we can put in agents and assets and create color revolutions,
yeah.
frankly. Right? It's like
Yeah. And homegrown ones too.
the more recent riots are looking more similar because they are actually run by people that are trained to set up these
Yes.
kinds of events and
Yeah.
conflicts. Um, and so the NGOs are part of that. There was another layer of this. Um, oh, the nonviolent, right? And in the CIA lexicon, nonviolent means this stuff. It it it
This is
it's
nonviolent.
it simply means not military.
Right. So
Nonviolent
that's
is code for not military.
right. It's still code. Right. It's
It's
still a
it's
lie.
it's totally code. It just it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's mostly peaceful, which means that, like, it hasn't turned into a military coup yet.
Yet. Right. But
Right.
that's the goal.
Right. And so when when the CIA is saying things like this is nonviolent activity, it's their code for this is it's not hot war,
Yeah.
but it's nonviolent, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Talk about word spell, right? Not even the
Yeah.
Orwellian
You're
word spell. It's like
right.
this is obviously silly because this is clearly violent in anybody's ordinary lexicon.
Well,
But
this is why people have started noticing the changing of language, right?
right, but I mean, it sort of made sense. I think it sort of makes sense. And the CIA is writing this stuff in the early '50s, right? It's like it's not actual war, right?
Yeah.
It's not like what we just
It's a
finished doing
military
in Europe.
operation,
It's a
right?
not military, right? So
They did
when
this
you
in Korea. Korea was a police action. It's not a war.
that too, right? They're playing that game. But the
Yeah.
nonviolent in this means it's not military action. That's all.
Hmm.
So anything that doesn't go military action stays in the nonviolent category.
Right. The government does not have to take your guns away, right? I mean, the government doesn't always, or what, how is this put, right? The government just has to just has to not protect you. They don't have to attack you directly. They just have to not protect you when the people they tell you to attack you do it,
Mm,
right? They can use mobs like this as a tool
right.
to control other people.
Yes, and the CIA, purposefully as like all thinking back to all those spy movies we used to love to watch, right? Or like I mean, or that the '60s and that '60s spoof anarchist movie is
Which one?
the '60s. I this is what I'm wondering about all these '60s riots and such. It's like, do we know
Yeah.
that there are other this top of the Cold War, right? There's
No, no,
all
they were
sorts
totally
of other
infiltrated.
actions
Yeah.
going on.
I think that it was a really good show called The Americans that covered that pretty well about two embedded Soviet spies who pretend to be an American married couple, and they
Oh
move,
yeah.
get married, they have children, and yeah, they were there to infiltrate the civil rights movement with communism to inculcate it.
Okay, so now we're to today. Here we are. Flag of Mexico above the flames.
Yeah, that is not the good image they thought it was. This is not Jean Valjean. This is like Juan Valdez, and he wants California back. At
Well, they
least
want
that's
it to
the
be Jean
message.
Valjean on the barricades for sure.
Yeah,
That's what
they
they
did, but
want.
they're
They want
not.
they
But
want liberty leading the people. That's 1830.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's not what this image says. Screw you. I'm going to burn your stuff down, and then I'm going to take over the land. It's like who are these people that they believe? Do they actually believe this?
Well,
That
they do because of the way young people don't get taught the full backstory by the old ladies. I'm gonna just hammer that
Okay,
in.
but do they really believe the rhetoric that Americans are weak and will just fold like a cheap suit? We're not
Yes.
Gavin Newsom.
Yes, they do believe
They, they,
that.
maybe they think we're Gavin Newsom. No, this is ridiculous. Okay, they're from Mexico. Do you know your own history? Do you know how you lost California
Probably
the
not.
first time?
No, they wouldn't.
It
I
was
mean,
crap like this.
most Americans don't know how we have California.
Yeah, well, they should
I mean,
look up the
the
Mexican
version of the
American
story
War.
one, the version of the story everybody gets told, and I know this having grown up in New Mexico and therefore had there's New Mexico. Notice New Mexico is not on side with this stuff, right? Because New Mexico,
No.
despite sharing the name, has a completely different relationship with Mexico than the Californians. Mainly because the Hispanics in New Mexico are families that have been there for hundreds of years, and
Hmm.
they know enough of their history to know how Mexico City basically abandoned them
Yeah,
because they were the backup beyond, and they were never very
yeah.
profitable.
They were the hillbillies they didn't want, right?
Basically,
In the
yes,
backcountry. Yeah.
yes, they were the backpack. It's like if you love Santa Fe, it's still pretty remote, right? And it was remote
Hmm.
from Mexico City down the Camino Real. It's a fair ways away through a lot of desert, and so it was always hard for Spain to keep up that particular province.
It was a large area Spain
Yeah,
owned,
yeah.
very large.
So, but up in California, and we've seen this with the people posting all the history. Thanks for the internet. That Mexico technically only held California for like 30 years because prior to that it was
Hmm.
the Spanish. So
Right.
which the claiming that this is for Mexico, it's like, well, okay, how far back are we going to go? Which colony do you which empire do you want to belong to?
Yeah.
I mean, I want Los Angeles to belong yet again to Our Lady of the Angels, Our
She
Lady Queen of
does.
Angels.
She does. You can't lose that
Our
name.
Lady
She'll.
needs defending from this stuff.
Yep.
Yep. Hmm. Well, do we peaceful protests versus dangerous radicals? Yes. Well,
Yeah, it's part of the reason that these people are burning things, and then the MSM is saying, oh, it's mostly peaceful, and they're just enjoying watching some cars burning and saying all kinds of gaslighty things to you. Is because over the past 5 years, people who are praying actually peacefully
mm-hmm.
were treated like criminals, while people who were burning and looting and stealing, no more than $1,000, you can keep it, and people getting arrested for trying to stop them were treated like criminals, and that's why you know Mr. Jean Valjean wannabe thinks that Americans are going to fold like a cheap suit because they treated actually peaceful people who would do something about it, even some if that something was just praying, would throw them in jail. Whereas
Yes. Well,
people who are doing
we could have
violence would get out.
if we do Waco, we'll do opposite
Yeah,
world, right? So the
yeah,
CIA setting up color revolutions in other countries, and the FET and the FBI setting up sting operations here. And
yep,
it's like, so the sort of feeling, it's like, which side are we on here, right? Because on the one hand, we would like, the National Guard and the Marines to keep LA from being burned to the ground again. But on the other hand, I mean, that whiskey rebellion, should we trust the government?
not always, right? And after that whiskey rebellion, after the whiskey insurrection, they had the Constitutional Convention, and I think the Bill of Rights was added. But and and George Washington became president. But yes, so there were some things done after that.
Well, I don't know. So here, Rogue Wave is saying, make Mexico Habsburg again. There you go.
I'm sorry. Okay, I don't know that. Were they Habsburg?
Yes, because that's when Charles V and when it's conquered under Charles V, the Habsburg, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
okay.
then the Habsburg, the Holy Roman Empire part goes one way and Spain goes another, and so Philip II is only king of Spain, but they're Habsburgs, right? So the Habsburg, it's actually part of the Habsburg Empire originally
Gotcha.
at the very beginning. Yes, and
That's funny.
um well, no,
Very good.
the sort of whose side are you on, and like which empire is it, right?
Yeah.
Of our long story about our Anglo Empire, which is basically pirates stealing from the Spanish, which is why we have dollars. Oh, yes.
That's right. Mexicans, the dollar is it's a Spanish word,
It's
right?
a thaler. Well, it's actually German, right? So what I looked this up today because I was reading in the book on the alchemy of paint, which is part of our research for Draco Chemicus
Hmm.
about gold, and he pointed out that in fact our dollar sign is the two pillars of Hercules. Talk about like when did it all go bad, right? The pillars of
Yeah.
Hercules, which would be on either side of the Straits of Gibraltar, going from the Mediterranean out into the Atlantic, and the original Spanish coin had a banner on it that was saying "Ne plus ultra," right? Not beyond these pillars, except for they did,
Mm.
right? So that's sort of a brag, right? And but the silver, the dollars, the silver was coming from Czechoslovakia, and the town was something something thaler. So they were thalers, right? They were
Oh,
from the thaler, which ends up as thalares, which ends up as dollar. And I
interesting.
learned from my service on the Cultural Property Advisory Committee that the numismatists see they have an argument about whether or not you can count these Spanish reals as um, cultural property in South America, because in the 19th century in the United States it counted as legal tender.
Really?
Yeah, the coins
They would just
you could use those coins as, so we've been entangled with the Spanish for a while.
for a while. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, it makes it interesting with the claim about whether we're Mexico or not. And I mean, this is a problem. It's like having grown up in New Mexico where there were Hispanics and Pueblos and Navajo. They're all from before the Anglos showed up. Exactly what kind of claim, all of it's like we've had Koreans and Chinese and there's Vietnamese, and LA is a complicated place. Figuring out who,
Yes.
saying it
Big
actually belongs
place.
to Mexico is, um I mean, historically nonsensical, and you're going to have to deal with those Koreans. Right.
That's right. Yeah. Because they're
Hmm.
not going anywhere.
So, working men shall Americans or English rule. Ooh, that's the back in the
That is
day. That's from
the
the opera
Astor
house.
Opera House, right?
We're in the
So
same story still.
yes, so they were advertising for a mob. Working men, shall Americans or English rule in this city? The crew of the British steamer have threatened all Americans who shall dare express their opinions this night. You get what they just did there? They're threatening you just because you want to express an opinion. Come
Mm.
and express your opinion at the English aristocratic opera house. It's called the Astor Opera House. So they were calling it the English aristocratic opera house. So they're trying a bit of they're trying a bit of class warfare here.
Mm.
We advocate no violence, but a free expression of opinion to all public men. Working men, free men, stand by your lawful rights. The American Committee. So they were advertising for people to show up
Mm. And this is what happened before the riot.
before the riot. Yes,
No
before the
violence.
mob.
So this advocating no violence. So this is 1840.
Well, it's a dog whistle, right? No violence, wink, wink, right?
Right, but so
They're
that's
using they're using strong they're using strong inflammatory rhetoric here. I
right.
mean,
But
they're
I
they're,
was
they're
saying that
basically,
the CIA has set up this category of nonviolent action, right? And this shows
right,
that it's actually older.
yeah, right,
This sort of workaround of, we'll have an action, but it won't be violent.
right. They don't want you to express your opinion, so show up and express your opinion, but no violence. How dare they, by the way? But no violence, right? Yes, it was very inflammatory.
Well, now I'm curious. So this is, I mean, all of this, the 1840 stuff, it all comes, the barricades and stuff, they come from memories of what happened in um, Paris in 1789. Right, it's like
Mm,
the Parisians practiced the city violence a lot, and some of the reason that they did the stuff in Les Miserables and they do that city rebuilding was
hmm.
also it's military, right? You need to have those big wide boulevards so the
Uh,
citizens can't make those barricades anymore.
oh, interesting.
You know
Okay.
that they're and you could, it's clear, like with our freeways, our interstate system, our federal interstate system is so clearly a military.
Oh no, that was. I mean, Eisenhower did that after the war.
Right.
They wanted planes to be able to take open land, but also he had seen the Autobahn,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to duplicate it because it meant quick troop movements.
Right. So they're Roman
Yeah,
roads. They're just like the Roman
yeah,
roads, which are entirely troop movement roads. Accidentally, conveniently, you can have commerce on them, but they're really troop movements.
yeah. Right.
Okay, so now I'm wondering about that no violence. But here we have no kings. Shall we sing the song again? No kings, la 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 la. Fools, I shall be king,
Right.
and
So
will never be hungry again. I mean,
never.
has it?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we liked Lion King. I thought King was a resonant image for Americans. What is this no king stuff?
Okay. So 6. Okay. So if you go down to line 6, I want to say this is a full page ad in the New York Times, paid for by Walmart heiress, billionaires, Christy Walton. You get down to I just said to line 6. It says, "We respect our neighbors and trading partners. We support a healthy national and international economy." She is all for cheap goods from China.
Mm,
That's what this is about. That's what this is about. So she's saying we want no kings here. It's similar to the WTO riots or the Occupy Wall Street. There's going to be people recruited who are anti-capitalist, but the capitalist is the one benefiting from it and
right.
promoting the riot. She's on both sides. She's standing on both sides.
Mobilize. The mob is actually in the word,
Yeah.
which comes from same from the mobile of
Very good.
The Roman mob, right? It's like be
Yeah.
mobilized is a call for a mob. Good
Yeah.
job.
Yes. And there's quite a few politicians that are against the tariffs for a number of reasons that would probably support her, at least quietly. Gavin Newsom's not quiet. He's just outright bought and paid for by the CCP.
Mm.
It's the only reason he cleaned up LA was when Xi was coming to visit.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
Yes, because I have been in LA and a lot of it's not so salubrious, and there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people there. I mean, I was standing at a bus stop, and the person I was with was saying, "Don't look," and this guy, like, on, I guess, fentanyl, right? With the
Mm,
people that there's what they can't keep their clothes on.
no,
They're stooped over and sort of swaying a lot, and
like zombies. Yeah.
yeah, because if they lie down, they just pass out, and they don't. So they try to keep themselves upright because they don't want to fall asleep.
These people deserve help, and California deserves better than Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom and everybody who's supporting them and supporting this status quo. Nobody's ever going to live or get help as long as they're allowing this.
Yeah, well, it does
I'm
seem
not.
they want it, right? It's like
Yeah.
they don't seem to. I mean, they're trying to clean up the city so they can have the Olympics there, which is
Interesting.
hilarious,
It's
right?
interesting because
Yeah.
the Olympics were those Watts riots in 1965, and then there were more riots in 1968. I think there were some more in the 70s too. And then the Olympics was in 1984, and the city was cleaned up and had this great image.
Hmm.
And now it seems to have reversed. Now it's the Olympics are coming very fast on the heels of what looks to be a purposeful destruction of Los Angeles and indeed most of California. California is a beautiful state. It's got a lot of great people in it, and they deserve way better than what they've got right now.
Yeah.
And I hope they take it back from whoever's doing this no kings crap, right?
Well, this is, I mean, this is back to our beginning, confusion about exactly. I mean, this is like which evil do you think whose side on what?
Yeah,
That I mean, the more I read about modern history, the more medieval history just seems so plain and clarifying. it's like it's like
1,000 year hindsight is 2020.
I mean, some part of it is there. There's the cycles you see, right? You see the generational cycles. You see the 80-year cycles a lot, right? There's
Yeah.
just no magic numbers in it. It's human lifetimes and memories, and it does seem to, institutions seem to have to be revived and reformed at 80 to 100-year intervals. Which, I mean,
Mm.
it makes sense, right? Monasteries, cities, governments. Um,
4 generations, 20 years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, people have been talking about how, it's a compound interest debt cycle that
Mm.
fits too, but it's the, you know, okay, so this is a little sidebar on, I'm working on a paper on Saint Francis, and Francis is famous. One, the oldest picture of him is him holding a little banner that says "Peace beyond this house," right?
Mm.
Italy in his lifetime was one war after another. I mean,
Yes.
he was a prisoner of war for a year after being, Assisi wasn't even that big of a place, right? A few thousand people, and they have, war against neighboring towns, right? So the sort of mob violence and military activity is a feature of civilization. Um,
Mm.
but that he would go in, and I guess some of the friars after him, they try to make peace between these factions in the region, and it just kept going. It went on for centuries, over and over
Mm.
and over again. I mean, the Renaissance, actually, I found out the Renaissance happens because they find alum near Rome and Florence, and it's basically another drug trade, except for that's for fixing dye and clothes.
All right. Yeah.
it's a it's a color fixer, so you can. That's how Florence gets so rich. There's no magic. It's trade, right? But there's no
Yeah.
like particular magic in humanism. I think. I think
So
that.
there's something. So there's something to the magic of Italian fashion, then,
Oh
right?
yes, yes, the magic of Italian
Interesting.
fashion for
Goes way
sure.
back.
But the sort of idea. I mean, this is where Marx isn't wrong in saying the physical conditions that people are living in affect a lot. And one of the big physical
Hmm.
conditions that are affecting people in this story tonight is streets and buildings. It's,
Yeah.
the cities. What are the cities? Oh, right. But the meta question being, who's behind, who's our last question. Like, I can't believe it's World War III season already. I still have my pandemic decorations. So what story are we really in that we
Yeah.
keep returning to constantly?
Yep. Yeah. Wash, rinse, repeat.
Well, and I do wonder about that. It's like the wash, rinse, repeat. I was wondering today, because we're looking at another wash, rinse, repeat of Iran is almost about to have nuclear weapons, which apparently they've been doing since Rodney King riots. It's always
Yes.
been
Yeah.
a year or two away, right?
Why does nobody worry that Pakistan has the bomb?
Um,
Or India or Israel?
Indeed, right?
Us.
So we do seem to be caught in these reruns, and those, us inquiring minds. The chat's frozen up, but I want to see whether the chat's still there with. Oh, cats. We were having a good chat with our. There we
Well, the
go.
last
Okay,
time a bunch
okay.
of
Here we go. Rogue Wave says the interstate system destroyed our small town businesses. Yes, it's. I mean, Cars
yeah,
is a great movie because the cartoon,
it
because
is.
it
I like
shows
it.
what happened to the city. And there's a backdrop in Cars that's outside Amarillo, right? The Cadillac Ranch thing. They make it a
Oh,
rock formation behind there, and
oh,
Amarillo
cool.
is the city it is because of I-40 now. But Route
Mm,
66 was all of the little towns that have retro diners now, but you have to get off the road
yes.
to see them.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I got to drive a bit of it a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but the who's behind it all. Why do these things keep repeating? Is there a law? I mean, the conspiracy theories out there on the internet will suggest that this is. I mean, you said this at the beginning of our discussion. It's the same old families like the Waltons. We go back to the
Yeah,
Waltons, right? The same old,
yeah,
it's the same old families creating the conditions in which the people destroy their own houses and then somebody else builds on top of it their new boulevard.
yes, yeah. Where's Lahaina today? It's gone.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, adorable little town. It was a town that was a real family town, right? Still don't know why it's gone. It went up in 2 hours, gone.
But that was a fire rather than a mob.
That was a fire rather than the mob, but they don't know how it started, and they don't know why there was no water coming out of the fire hydrants.
Yeah, I think this is the activating the city against itself is
Yeah,
another layer, right? Activating
which is
active
which
the
happened. Which happened.
mobilizing the workers so that they do, the Jean Valjean.
Yeah, this happened in Pacific Palisades too. No water came out
Right.
of the hydrants.
No, I was
Gone.
wondering more about like who's we have no answer.
No, we don't.
The
But what
how
you can
mobs
you,
work, which we've studied to a certain extent, and it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting how various and similar the stories are, which is a problem.
yes.
How I think one level of it is it does take instigators. I don't think these mobs just happen
No, they're
anyway.
absolutely instigated. They're
And
instigated just like the Haymarket might when somebody mingles in the middle of it and throws a bomb at the police,
right,
right?
right.
Where they've been meeting and they were that the gathering was ending because the police were moving it along, right? Because you've been here long enough, and so there wasn't any violence until then.
Mm.
Somebody was taking advantage.
Well, this is the anarchist throwing things. So Rogue Wave is saying, "I'm a
Right.
country bumpkin, maybe I'm biased, but if you made the buildings beautiful, I bet you wouldn't get popular support for burning it down." That's a problem because Paris is very beautiful and they burn it down on a regular
Yes.
basis.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
And
the
there are a lot of beautiful buildings in Los Angeles, even the industrial type ones that were built
mm,
in the 40s. They still built things beautifully before the Second World War. Nobody's torching a bunch of brutalist architecture.
but they make brutalist architecture out of concrete so they can't torch it.
Yeah,
Well, okay. I'm feeling like we've gotten to the end and we're still in the dark of why we are stuck in the reruns.
but at least you know we're stuck in the reruns. There is a pattern.
This
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 happens over and over
this
again.
is a very good point. We are stuck in the reruns. If you feel like you're stuck in the reruns, you're right. We're stuck in the
Correct.
reruns. And that should
Yes,
make
you
you
are.
thoughtful about people putting full page ads in the newspaper calling you to mobilize.
Mob up.
Consider no kings, no kings, la 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 la. I'm gonna have to watch the Lion King. That's my favorite part. Fools, I will be king. I mean, it's so funny because it's like everybody. The whole point of Lion King is there's a good king and a bad king. Kings of
Right.
themselves are not necessarily the issue. However, and then we'll leave you with this: that Terry Pratchett in his Night Watch plays off this problem of the barricades and the mob and the desire his Clint Eastwood Captain Vimes character um, is the descendant of the guy who chopped off the last king's head and they haven't had kings and he's always about the law. He wants the law. You live by the law, not the kings, and the king is just some guy who thinks he's going to be above the law, so you have to live by the law. But he joins the barricade, or no, did they how did they he ends up on the barricades, and then Night Watch they're all remembering what it was like when the barricades went up.
Mm,
So I think some of this is also the propensity for the desire to be on the right side in the glorious battle, and that's a temptation for sure.
yes.
Just beware of thinking that you're on the right side because they're flying your flag rather than the other flag.
Right.
That's it. That's it. We'll go with that. Okay, guys, thanks for hanging out with us, meditating on the archive, meditating on the meaning of history, and helping us tie the threads together and find the pieces of the mosaic. Next week, we have another special guest talking about writing poetry with us. So, and stay tuned for exactly what time we're going to start, because we have requests on whether or not it'll be at our usual time or a little bit later in the evening. Anyway, thanks, everyone. Good night. Oh, and right. Thank you, Casey, for teaching taking the helm for us tonight and
I hope I did well.
guiding. Yes, you did. You had excellent examples, and I will not forget the Astor Opera riot over
Yeah, that was wild.
Shakespeare. Working Men Unite, the way we perform Shakespeare. That's got to be up there in the great mysteries of the moment. Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Right. Good night, everybody.
Nothing.
Don't be mobilizing.